Today, we're diving into a really uncomfortable question, one that big companies and governments have to grapple with all the time. Can you actually put a price on a human life? I know, it sounds totally unthinkable, but as we're about to see, it happens a lot more than you'd think.
And look, this isn't just some abstract late-night dorm room debate. This is a question with massive, real-world consequences. This is where philosophical ideas crash into the cold, hard reality of how business and policy get made.
So, let me ask you, how much is a human life worth? You'd probably say it's priceless, right? Infinite. But back in the 1970s, one of the biggest companies in the world decided, nope, it's not. In fact, they put an exact dollar amount on it. And this right here is not a thought experiment. It's a real internal memo from the Ford Motor Company about their car, the Pinto. See, they knew its fuel tank had a nasty habit of exploding in rear-end collisions. They also knew a simple $11 part could fix it. But when they ran the numbers, fixing the entire fleet would cost them $137 million. On the other hand, just letting people die and get injured, they calculated that would only cost about $49.5 million. The math was simple and horrifying. It was cheaper not to fix the car. $200,000. That's the number they landed on. That was the value Ford assigned to a human life. The cost-benefit analysis couldn't have been clearer. Paying for the deaths was just better for the bottom line. Now, this seems absolutely monstrous, but this kind of cold calculation is actually rooted in a very specific and surprisingly influential philosophy.
So, what kind of thinking could possibly lead to a memo like that? Well, whether Ford's executives realized it or not, the logic behind it comes straight from a powerful moral theory called utilitarianism.
At first glance, utilitarianism sounds, well, it sounds like common sense, doesn't it? The idea is that whenever you have a decision to make, you should just add up all the good things that will happen, subtract all the bad things, and pick the option that produces the most overall happiness or utility for everyone involved. It's like a moral calculator. The guy who really championed this way of thinking was an 18th century philosopher named Jeremy Bentham. He had this big idea. He wanted to make morality into a science. Something objective and rational, not something based on, fuzzy feelings or ancient rules. And Bentham's logic was actually super simple. He said, look, at the end of the day, we're all run by two basic things, pleasure and pain. That's just a fact of human nature. So he argued any real moral system has to be built on that fact. The right thing to do, the only right thing to do, is to maximize pleasure and minimize pain for the most people possible. Simple, right? But as we're about to see, that simple logic can lead us down some very dark roads. You see, the Ford Pinto case wasn't just some weird one-off. This greatest good calculator has been used in other ways that have sparked total public outrage, and they really show the dark side of this seemingly simple math. Get this, a study commissioned by the tobacco company Philip Morris in the Czech Republic, it argued that governments actually make money when their citizens smoke. Yeah, sure, there are higher healthcare costs, but the government gets tax revenue from cigarette sales, and this is the truly chilling part, it saves a ton of money on pensions, housing, and healthcare for the elderly because smokers die earlier. The study concluded the government came out ahead by $147 million. As you can imagine, the public backlash was so intense, Philip Morris had to apologize for its heartless calculation. These examples expose two massive problems with this pure, simple version of utilitarianism. First, is it really possible to measure and compare everything on a single scale, like money? Is a human life really the same kind of thing as a car part? And second, what about the rights of the individual? If making 1,000 people happy requires making one person miserable, does the math just make that okay?
This leads to a pretty horrifying historical example. Back in ancient Rome, they used to throw Christians to the lions in the Colosseum for entertainment. A strict utilitarian would have to do the math. You have the absolute terror and agony of one Christian weighed against the collective joy and excitement of thousands and thousands of cheering Roman spectators. If there are enough happy Romans, does their pleasure justify that one person's torture? This is what's called the tyranny of the majority, and it is brutal. And this whole issue of trying to put a price on everything isn't new. Back in the 1930s, a psychologist named Edward Thorndike tried to prove that literally any experience or desire could be measured and given a dollar value. But look at his results. The thing people demanded the most money for wasn't getting a tooth pulled or even eating a live worm. It was living the rest of their life on a farm in Kansas. The results are so absurd, they seem to prove the exact opposite of his point. You just can't compare these things on the same scale. So, with these huge, glaring problems, you might think utilitarianism was dead in the water. But then another philosopher, John Stuart Mill, came along and he tried to save it. He thought you could still aim for the greater good, but in a way that respected individual rights and understood that not all pleasures are created equal. The big difference between Bentham and Mill really came down to their view on pleasure. For Bentham, pleasure was pleasure. A silly kid's game, pushpin, was just as good as reading profound poetry if they both gave you the same amount of enjoyment. But Mill said no way. He argued that some pleasures are higher. They engage our minds, our creativity, our humanity, while others are lower. Let's run a little experiment. If I asked a room full of people which of these they find more enjoyable to watch, a classic episode of The Simpsons, a play by Shakespeare, or an old episode of Fear Factor, what do you think they'd say? Almost everyone would pick The Simpsons. It's funny, it's easy, it's immediately pleasurable. But here's where it gets interesting. If I ask that same group a different question, which of these is the highest or worthiest pleasure? Well, the results flip completely. Almost everyone says Shakespeare. And that is exactly Mill's point. We can enjoy something simple more, but we still recognize that some experiences are qualitatively better, more valuable for our minds and souls. And this quote from Mill just says it all. It is better to be a human being wrestling with big, difficult questions, even if it makes you unhappy sometimes, than to be a simple animal, like a pig, that's perfectly content but knows nothing else. Engaging our higher human abilities, Mill argued, is what a good life is all about, even if it's not always easy or fun. So, where does all this leave us? Did Mill actually save utilitarianism by making it more humane? Or by bringing in these ideas of higher values and individual rights, did he have to lean on some moral standard outside of pure utility? Did he have to break the theory in order to fix it? And that leaves us right back at the core dilemma, doesn't it? This fundamental clash between doing what's best for the group and protecting the rights and dignity of every single person. It's a question we are still fighting over today, in our hospitals, in our governments, and even in the lines of code we're writing for artificial intelligence right now. But to close this out, let's go all the way back to the founder, Jeremy Bentham. He was a man who tried to live his entire life, and even his death, by his own philosophy. And his final act was maybe the most utilitarian thing he ever did. In his will, Bentham asked a very utilitarian question: of what use can a dead man be to the living? His answer was to have his body preserved and put on display as what he called an auto-icon to inspire future thinkers. And today, his actual skeleton, potted out with hay and wearing his own clothes, sits in a glass case at University College London. And get this, he is still occasionally wheeled out for board meetings, where the official minutes record him as present but not voting. It's a final, wonderfully eccentric testament to a man who truly believed that even in death, you should try to create the greatest good for the greatest number.